Mesh, against this backdrop then, the prospects of raising capital to feed this desperately hungry animal.
Thanks, Adrian. I think we just came back from a roadshow in the UK, the Middle East, and Europe. The first point I'll raise is that the international market is finally happy with what's happening in South Africa. There's optimism.
Sure.
And that's all we can ask.
Round of applause for that.
Really. Because it's interesting, because for the last 10 years, every time we took a corporate or an institution internationally to raise capital, we had about 40 minutes out of the 60 minutes allocated, which spoke about the macroeconomic issues and the political issues in the country. And we very rarely even got to the corporate that we were taking around the world. And that was a total waste of our time and their time. When I went, 2 weeks ago, the difference was we heard the electricity works again. We heard that they're solving the Transnet issue. And we see your president talking positively about the country. And that's hugely important. I think no matter where you are, perception in the capital markets is critical. So what else follows that? So the first thing that follows that is, minus the optimism, is infrastructure. And does South Africa have the relevant infrastructures to support our capital? Because ultimately, our investors want to know they have a return on their capital. It's, with the greatest respect, it's the only thing that's relevant to them. There's DFIs and there's other impact investors, but I'm talking about, sort of financial corporate investors. So Transnet needs to work, and it's critical. The murmurings coming out of government is probably more significant than murmurings, but it is seen as hugely positive. Eskom is seen as potentially a turnaround story for the country, and if that can continue, I think the international market is very comfortable with it. The third thing is that the environment has to stabilize. People need to know what empowerment is about and what BE is about and how it works. And we don't educate the international market enough about these things. Empowerment, land redistribution and reform. These are the issues that what I find mostly from investors, there's a throwaway comment because they have a neighbor that was South African that now lives in Australia or the UK that has told them how awful this empowerment, sort of policy of government is. And so for me, it's about making sure that we're selling South Africa continuously, that we're talking about the positive aspects, and that we're fixing the aspects that the international community need. And if we do that, there is a wall of capital waiting to come back into South Africa, and we're seeing that, certainly with the rates starting to decrease, in developed markets, we will be a home for that capital. But that window is not large. And if we miss that window and we haven't fixed some of these things, or at least, sort of portrayed to fix some of these things, I don't think we will be the recipient of that capital. But I will leave you with two other things, is that the Middle Eastern investors, we've raised money from the Qataris, from the Abu Dhabis, and we're working with the Saudis to bring a significant amount of capital into this country. The criticism from all of them is they have not seen South African institutions in the last 7 years. So the reality is that where are the roadshows from our corporates and from our banking and finance institutions? And we've had to go to them at times where we knew they were never going to invest in South Africa, but you've got to start a process. It's a journey with capital. And we're not seeing enough of that. I know government is trying their very best, but I think we can put this on steroids, and we need to, because I think we've got 18 months to do it. And if we don't do it then, I think when we talk to international capital, it'll be quite difficult to attract that investment.
So just so that I understand your point about the institutions on the roadshows, doing roadshows, is this about our corporate and investment banks?
Our corporate and investment banks.
Okay.
So
there's a call to action to quite a few people in the room.
Yeah. And I think, and I understand why, because it's been a long time since international mega investors have invested in South Africa. But for the first time post-GNU, We've seen the BlackRocks come back into South Africa. We've seen Blackstone come to visit. We've seen Apollo come to visit. We've seen every major, and these are trillion-dollar businesses.
Yeah.
And that's the first time they've come in probably 5 years. So I understand why the banks and other institutions like ours have lost interest in the Middle East and other pots of capital. It's because they haven't invested in the last 5 to 7 years. But that's changing, and we've almost got to catch that wave now.
And your point, even modest allocations from those behemoths would be game changers for a country of our size, an economy of our size.
Absolutely. I'll give you 2 examples of deals we're working on now. Is we have a $750 million transaction.
You nearly said trillion.
But we wish. you know, and that's a big amount of money.
Yeah.
All that capital will come from offshore. And hopefully the PIC will follow in. So what we also see...
And that's into infrastructure.
Into infrastructure.
Okay.
Across SA and Africa. But the important thing there is it's a catalyst to bring the PIC in. So you bring the PIC in and a lot of international, funders follow. The DBSA. Bring the DBSA in and a lot of international capital will also follow.